Welcome to my channel, everyone. And today we're going to be doing part 2 of The Last Church. Not The Lost Church, because I'm an idiot and misspelled it last time, which made the algorithm punch it into the ground. Anyways, I also want to apologize. I did what I told myself not to do in these videos last week and ranted and put a bunch of scripture that I didn't even have planned in it, and made it 100 times longer. So today I'm going to make it up to you guys, and it's just going to be my opinions, no scripture or anything like that. So let's go ahead and get into this.
We will turn on each other, friend Apocalypsis. Your vision will bring only an eternity of war. When gods clash, galaxies burn.
Oh.
So what would you have me say? There are more faiths than yours, Uriah, and each faith has equally zealous defenders. How many generations of conflict until your message of peace turns to a crusade against those who do not share your beliefs? Where there are differences, humanity will find them, and these differences are so fundamentally rooted in...
Ain't that the truth? We always find something to divide over, you know? That is the truth.
You, as others' beliefs, are in...
Especially in religious, right? You get sects, right? And different, Christianity, right? Jesus says one body, right? But yet we got 40,000. But anyways, so.
In others, there can be no resolution without conflict.
You find nothing but exceptions to my arguments, never any rules by which to measure them.
How can I find rules in an inherently hypocritical system? Your book has been rewritten, translated, and twisted to fit the needs of hundreds of anonymous authors for hundreds of years. The faith is eternal, but the...
See, that's one thing with the Bible is there's about 5,000 manuscripts, right, of the Masoretic Hebrew text. And then you also got the Greek text, which would be the New Testament, right? So there is, throughout history, there's all these texts and stuff like that, which is why I trust the King James Bible more than I do any of the newer translations. I'll leave it at that.
Story and morals are not. One man here...
I'll just say King James was done by, 49 different linguists and stuff like that, while usually the newer ones are done by one group.
Here's his dead grandfather, and he is locked away in an asylum.
Usually
But
biased.
if he heard the voice of God, he would be venerated and might well become a saint. How is this a logical and rational system?
I will say this, a lot of people who say they hear from God and stuff like that is usually themselves, right? If it doesn't agree with what the Bible says, right, it's probably yourself. And I think a lot of people blame things on Satan, demons, and stuff like that when it's really just a broken mind, or, less chemicals, or, unbalanced chemicals, sorry. Oops. And I think people use that as a crutch, I guess, per se, right? And then they'll use God told me this, which, by the way, is taking God's name in vain, right? Which is saying God told me when he didn't tell you, right? But anyways, I'm sorry.
It is my faith. Respect my beliefs as I respect yours, despite your constant slights against my life's dedication.
Did you not say we should joust? Why does your faith require such protection? Is it not robust enough to withstand my questioning? No one else on this world enjoys such protection.
That is, yeah, Emperor's right there. I mean, like I say all the time, if you can't prove it, why do you believe it?
Protection from scrutiny. So why should you and your faith be singled out for special treatment?
Why is it that faith is being targeted for destruction? Perhaps there is enough
That is true. And it is a little ironic, he's sitting here saying how religion, which it has, caused destruction and stuff like that, right? But here he is, causing destruction, right? And then, of course, the Imperium now is all religious.
Truth behind my words that the Emperor, in all his wisdom, fears their holy power? Or is it because there are people too obstinate to accept that there may be something that science cannot quite explain? I have seen my God. I saw his face and heard his words in my soul.
Do not expect me or anyone else to give your experience credence, Uriah.
And there's something with that, you know, because if you think about it, the angels and stuff like that, right? They have all these abilities and stuff like that. But to them, that's just, you know, what they've always had. It's nothing to them, right? Science or something, right? There's something to it, right? But we look at it as some kind of like super duper supernatural power, right? You see this a lot in the book of Enoch, right? Enoch would be like, "Oh man, this is wondrous. This is whatever." And the angel looks at him, he's like, "Why are you so, you know, um, I can't think of a word. You know, basically the angels is like, what are you so up and or happy about? You know, it's like it's just a tree or whatever. You know." Anyways,
Despite what you think you saw, you may believe it to be real, but just because you believe something to be true does not make it so.
I saw what I saw.
that is true. That is
I
true.
heard what I heard. That day on the fields of Frank has never lost its clarity. I relive it with every
Right? Just because I believe in Jesus Christ, right, doesn't necessarily make him real, right? Gotta prove it.
waking moment in which I am not occupied.
And where in Frank did this miraculous vision take place, priest?
On the killing field of Gadwer.
You were at Gadwer.
I was.
Will you tell me what happened?
I'll tell you what happened. But first, I need another drink.
Oh, this is where we left off. Oh well. I think this is where we left off.
No, friend Apocalypsis. This is the good stuff.
Yeah.
You deign to drink this from a tumbler.
Oh well.
Now we will drink from a glass.
I guess I better say this, that of course all credit goes to Kill Team Hungary and I forget the fan animation, the guy who created it. Ah, shoot. Is it down here? Anyways, if you want to go see it, it's not on YouTube anymore. It's here on Odyssey. Because I think there was some issues that they had, which I think they did kind of infringe a little bit. But anyways.
The water of life.
I wouldn't say that. I never, like, I used to be a decent drinker, but I never really akin to it. You know what I mean? Because I always hated that the next day, man. The next day, I just couldn't take it, man. I'm not a big alcohol drinker anymore, that's for sure. I do have some every now and then, a few shots.
The flavor. Swirl it a little. See the slits on the side of the glass? They are called tears. And since they are long and descending slowly, we know the drink is strong and full-bodied.
And how long must we wait?
Patience, friend Apocalypsis. This wine has sat for many decades. It can sit for a few more minutes.
That is crazy how that works.
Feel the aromas and how they stimulate your senses. Allow yourself a moment. Let the sense awaken the memories of their origin.
May I ask a personal question while we wait?
Well, it depends on the question, doesn't it?
Why is it you carry a timepiece that doesn't function?
Good question.
It is a family relic, you see. It has been with us since before even Old Night. No one knows when it broke, but as legend goes, it ticks before disaster strikes. I never believed it. Nor did my father. When I found it, however, it was a minute later than I always remembered it. Now it's a minute from midnight. My father always jested that the day it struck midnight would be the beginning of the end. I've kept it for decades. Never once seen it budge. I check it often, as if it could warn me of danger. Maybe there is hope, eh?
What movie is that from where it's like a watch, but it's like a hologram? Anyways.
A grim portent. You seem to surround yourself with...
Our memory sucks anymore.
Perhaps. But let's not ruin this good wine with such dour thoughts. My story has not yet even begun. We've waited long enough. Drink, friend Apocalypsis, generously. Hang on to the taste before it is gone.
Ah, that's a flavor I have not had in a long time. I didn't think any remained.
It is an old bottle. One I rescued from the ruins of my parents' home.
You make a habit of keeping old alcohol around.
Aye, a throwback to my wild youth. I was fond of the drink. A little too much even, if you take my meaning.
I do.
I feel
Many
that.
a great man has been brought low by such an addiction.
Addiction sucks.
You said you wanted to know of Gadwer.
Now, I wasn't addicted to
If you are
alcohol, but
ready and
other
willing
things.
to tell me of it, yes.
Willing, yes. Ready? Well, I suppose we will find out, eh?
Gadwer was a bloody day. It was hard on all who were there. I understand.
I may be old, and my eyes may not be what they once were, but I can still tell that you are far too young to know of Gadwer. You would not have even been born when that...
I wouldn't say that. I definitely wouldn't say that, but
Trust me.
I guess he
I
probably
know
does
Gadwer.
look young. He is the Emperor.
I should tell you a little of myself first.
Big Daddy Emperor.
Who I was back then, and how I came to find God on the battlefield of Gadwer. If you have half a mind to hear it, anyway.
What is a story without its content?
Is this a like a futuristic Christian church, or is this just like a different faith altogether? Someone could let me know in the comments.
Text. Of course. Say what you feel needs to be said.
I was born in the town below this church. Nearly
I was
80
born
years
in the darkness.
ago. Youngest son of the
I'm not even
local
gonna try to do that voice.
My clan had come through the final years of Old Night with much of their wealth intact. They owned all the lands around these parts, from this very mountain all the way to the mainland bridge.
God bless it.
I wish I could say I was treated badly as a child, you know, to give reason for why I turned
There we
out
go.
what I did. I cannot. I was indulged and became something of a spoiled brat, given to drinking, carousing, and bouts of petulance. Looking back, I realized what a little shit I was. But of course,
Look like an 8-year-old there.
to look at themselves in their youth and realize
Looks like
all
me.
the mistakes they made.
When I was
Threats they carried.
14 years, 15 years old,
Anyway,
man.
I decided
Look
in
like
the
a kid.
adolescent fires of rebellion that I was going to travel the world and see whatever free corners of it remained in the wake of the Emperor's conquest. So much of the world had been brought under his sway, but I was determined to find one last patch of land that wasn't yet under the heel of his thunderbolt and lightning armies.
You make it sound like the Emperor was a tyrant. He ended the wars that were destroying the planet and defeated dozens of tyrants and despots. Without his armies, mankind would have descended into anarchy and destroyed itself within generations.
There's one thing you learn in history, though, man. Is that most revolutions, there's always somebody worse that comes in, yeah. But anyways,
He still is a tyrant. Perhaps humanity would have been better off that way, rather than under the shadow of this accursed eagle. Maybe the universe decided we'd had our chance, that our time was up.
Nonsense. The universe cares not a whit for our actions or us. Our fate is wrought by our hands, and no others.
A philosophical point we will no doubt return to, but I was telling you of my youth.
But of course, please, continue.
Thank you.
I mean, it is true. Even in a Christian sense, right? If you're not gonna be walking, you're right. Ain't nobody gonna hear a dang thing, right? Or let's say in a job or owning a business, you know, you're not gonna make any money if you're not gonna do it. Anyways.
Well, after I announced my intention to travel the world, my father was good enough to grant me a generous stipend and a retinue of soldiers to protect me on my journeys. I left that very day and crossed the Silver Bridge 4 days later, traveling across a land recovering from war, which was growing fat on the labors decreed by the Emperor. Hammers beat out plates of armor, blackened factories churned out weapons, and entire towns of seamstresses created new uniforms for his armies. I crossed to Europa and cruised my way across the continent, seeing the eagle-stamped banner everywhere I went. In every town and city, I saw people giving thanks to the Emperor and his mighty thunder giants. But I'll be damned if any of it was genuine. It was
I was gonna say, they probably kinda had to.
like they were going through the motions, because they knew it was dangerous not to. I'd seen the thunder giants as a child, but never in the wake of a conquest.
Did the Thunder Giants have full helmets? I'm sure they did, right? It's just,
Never quite seen the reality of them before that point. I was drunk and whoring my way down the Tali Peninsula when I came across a garrison of the Emperor's super soldiers at a ruined clifftop fortress. My damned romantic rebellious soul couldn't help but try and bait the giants. I called them many names. Freak, slave, the minor demons of a greater devil. I even told them the Emperor's only goal was to enslave all of the human race to his own towering ego. After having seen them battle in the fields of Frank, I shuddered to think of the fear I was in then. I thought I was being clever. In my own stupor, I convinced myself I was a hero. Looking back, I would never even have passed as a martyr. Eventually, one of the giants broke rank and approached me. I was monumentally drunk. I felt invincible as only a drunk and a fool could. This warrior was huge, far larger than any human I had ever seen. His entire body was encased in heavy, powered armor that enclosed his chest and arms.
you ain't getting far there.
Soldiers never made clearer to me than when that giant came over to me and lifted me up, tearing my shirt and upsetting me greatly. I kicked at his armor and beat my fists into bloody pulps against his chest, but he just laughed at me. I screamed at him to let me go, and he did just that, telling me to shut my mouth before tossing me off the cliff and into the sea.
Be
By the
gone,
time I
fool.
climbed the great steps back up into the village, they were gone, and I was left with just myself and a hatred greater than I had ever known. Stupid, really. I was asking for it, and it was only a matter of time until someone put me in my place.
And after Tali?
Here and there, I've forgotten a lot of those years, truth be told. I was drunk most of my waking hours. I know I took a sand skimmer across the Mediterranean wastes and traversed the wastelands of the North African conclaves that Shankal reduced to an arid desert. All I found was settlements that were busy paying homage to the Emperor. So I carried onwards, far into the east, to see the ruins of Ursh and the fallen bastions of Nath and Doom.
For a guy that doesn't like religion, man, he definitely likes to be praised, that's for sure.
Even there, however, in places so far away as to be the most desolate and remote corners of the world, I still found those who gave thanks to the Emperor and his gene-engineered warriors. I couldn't understand it. Didn't these people know they just exchanged one tyrant for another? And then again, it wasn't their choice.
Humanity was on the brink of extinction. I cannot convey this point any more clearly. Without unity, and without the Emperor, there would be no human race. I cannot believe that you do not see that.
Oh, I see it all.
Jesus does say, a house divided against itself will not stand. right?
I see that very clearly.
Something we could use today, right?
The devilish rogue did not, however. I was young and full of the fires of youth that see any form of control as oppression. Though they don't appreciate it, it is the function of the youth to
I'll
push
keep
at
my
the
mouth
boundaries
shut
of
on
the
that
previous
one.
generation, to poke and prod
I
and
think both
establish their
sides
own
are a
values.
joke, but I'll
It's no
just leave it
different
at
from any
that.
other youth. Well, perhaps a little.
So you'd traveled the world and hadn't found any corner of it that hadn't sworn allegiance to the Emperor. Where did you go next?
I returned home for a spell, bearing gifts I'd mostly stolen, and then set off again. But this time I went out as a soldier of fortune instead of a tourist. I'd heard rumors of unrest in the land of the Frank, and fancied myself a renowned war hero. The Frank were a fractious people, even before the days of unity. They were never ones to bow to invaders, even the ones who posed as benign. Once I reached the continent, I had heard of Havelek de Gross and the Battle of Avalroy, and rode straight for the town.
Avalroy, a town poisoned by the bitterness of a madman whose meager skill fell far short of his ambition.
Now, that much is obvious. Back then, the story was that Havelek was found wrongly accused of the brutal murder of the woman the Emperor appointed as governor. He was set to be shot by a firing squad when his brothers and friends attacked the local army units running the execution.
Oops, hopefully there ain't nowhere to go.
The death of a few locals in the fighting turned a small-scale riot into open rebellion. It got ugly faster than the town had time to
I
think.
can't believe I forgot to do that.
But by then, it was too late. Unfortunately for everyone, Havelek was a gifted orator and fanned the flames of the townfolk's ire at the Emperor's rule. Within the hour, a
Hopefully,
hastily
I'm
formed
sorry
militia
if it's
had stormed
bad.
the
I,
local army headquarters
yeah.
and seized the weapons within. None of the soldiers survived.
You are aware that Havulik did assault and murder the woman.
I learned that later, yes. By then it was far too late to do anything about it. By the time I reached Avalroy, full of piss and vinegar for the coming fight, Havelek had rallied a number of the local townships to his cause and amassed quite an army. It was magnificent, friend Apocalypsis, for it had been everything I had so desperately searched for. Icons of the Emperor being torn down, colorful buntings hanging from every window, bands playing in the streets constantly while Havelek and all of us, his soldiers, marched up and down the town. I swear it felt like we were an army of devilish, daring youths. We should have been training. We should have prepared. But our courage was buoyed up by the festivities, and more towns rose up against the Emperor's rule by the day. Within the week, we had amassed an army of nearly 40,000 strong. Truly, it seemed, I had found my glorious rebellion I had so desperately craved.
Probably didn't work out so well.
And courageous and dangerous.
Yeah.
It spoke to my romanticism for the heroic freedom fight.
These guys ain't doing nothing to those Thunder Warriors, man. Nothing. Anyways.
Fighters of old, we were absolutely sure that we would be the spark that would light the fires of rebellion all across the world and see the autocrat tumbled from his self-imposed rule. Then we heard that the Thunderbolt and Lightning armies were marching from the east, and we set off in grand procession, making all due haste. Havelek leading us from Avalroy was a joyous day. I'll never forget it. The laughter, the kisses from the girls, and the spirit of our shared brotherhood carried us off as we marched to battle.
Can't believe I forgot to turn down my mic.
In but a week of marching,
My
we reached
headphones.
Gadwer and set up our defenses atop a line of hills
So
directly
frustrating.
in the path of our enemies. We had all thought ourselves tactical geniuses, holding this strategically advantageous position. Had we any training and discipline, it might have made a difference. We held the high ground, and both of our flanks were anchored on strong positions. On the left were the ruins of the Gadwer bastion. On the right, the desolate marshes through which nothing could pass.
You must have known it was madness to engage the Emperor's armies. I mean, you had no hope of defeating them. His warriors were bred for battle and spent every waking moment in combat training.
Perhaps we knew. Maybe we didn't want to think about it. We were so full of hope, of optimism, we wouldn't allow ourselves to even consider defeat. When the Emperor's armies came into sight, we were nearly 50,000 strong, and we faced an army estimated at a mere 5,000. It was hard not to feel that we could win the day, especially with Havelek riding up and down and firing our blood. His brother tried to calm him, but it was far too late.
I say so.
Eventually, maybe a kilometer from our position, the giants halted their advance.
Is that the Custodes? Uh-oh. They done for now.
Instead of letting the spirit of the moment die, we charged down the hillside like mad, glorious fools, screaming war cries and waving swords, pistols, and rifles over our heads. It was maybe 6 or 7 ranks deep, and we only covered half the distance before the giants shouldered their weapons and opened fire.
Oh no. I think. Probably just the Thunder Warriors.
By God, the noise. I'll never forget it. The first volley was thunder that ripped down the line, and our first 5 ranks were cut down to a man.
Good thing this is way in.
Each of
3
their
minutes
bullets
in.
was a small bomb that ripped limbs from bodies and burst men open from the inside like wet sacks. Turned to shout, I was struck in the back of the head and fell forward into the ruptured body of another man. Rolling over, I felt the back of my head and
I will say they did do a good job on the animation, I think.
realized I had been hit. Shrapnel or some fragment, I figured. I could feel myself losing blood, weakening by the moment. Now the initial shock of the first few seconds had passed. The screaming began. The charge had ground to a halt, and now the men and women were milling around in confusion and fear. As the reality finally dawned on them, and they understood the magnitude of what Havelek had done. Now, the Thunder Warriors took their turn to charge. They broke into a run, and terror trembled beneath their feet. Most of those who had fallen but survived their volley were crushed beneath a giant metal boot. They all were unsheathing their swords with serrated edges and motorized blades. I'll never forget the sound of it all. The roar out of a nightmare it was. We had been defeated in the opening volley, but these warriors were without mercy. Havelek had somehow survived the initial barrage with only superficial wounds. And as I lay on my back dying, I watched him stare, dumbfounded, as the leading Thunder Warrior cleaved him in two with a single swing with his chain blade. Looking back at Havelek's army, I saw my terror mirrored on the face of every man and woman left, who were all begging for mercy, throwing down their weapons, trying to surrender, but the slaughter continued, heedless of their perils. They marched right up to them and hacked into them without mercy. All those people were cut apart so quickly and brutalized with such economy of force, I couldn't believe so many people could die in so short a time. It was not the glorious battle I had dreamed of. It was mechanized butchery. If I could have ran, I would have. And I'm not ashamed to say I lay there weeping, listening to the awful sound of people dying, and the wet sound of flesh being shorn from bodies, and the stench of voided bowels and open bellies, until the mercy of darkness overcame.
So I better pause it before I get in trouble or anything like that. Yeah, so got a little violence, I guess. Huh? Again, guys, I apologize if there's an echo at the for half of this.
When I woke, surprised I'd still lived, it was dark. In the distance, I heard the victory chants of the Thunder Warriors drifting across the fields, along with the smoke of victory pyres. Havelek's army had been destroyed. Not routed, not put to flight, destroyed. In less than an hour, 50,000 men and women had been killed. I never learned of any other survivors. Weak and laying in a field of human parts, I began to weep once more. I was in agony, bleeding to death and thinking how absolutely pointless my life had been. The heartache and ruin I had visited upon others in my reckless pursuit.
Can you imagine that, man? You're about to die and then just going through your life. That would suck.
Of hedonism and self-interest. I wept for my family and my myself. And that was when I realized I wasn't alone.
Who was with you?
The power of the divine. I opened my eyes and saw a golden face above me. A face of such radiance and perfection that my tears were no longer shed for my self-pity, but for his beauty. The light radiated from the figure, and I averted my eyes for fear I'd be blinded. I had been in pain, yes, but now that pain was gone, and I knew I was seeing the face of the divine. I could not describe that face to you. Not with all the poetic imagery in the world.
Oh, no way. Oh, man. That's the Emperor? I'm sorry. Oh, man.
But it was the most exquisite thing I had ever seen. I felt myself lifted up and thought this
Good.
And then
The irony.
spoke, and I knew I was destined to live.
What did this face say to you?
Why do you deny me? Accept me, and you will know that I am the only truth and the only way.
Did you reply?
I couldn't. To utter any words would have been base. In any case, my tongue was quite stilled by the awesome vision of God.
What made you think it was God? You were a dying man on a battlefield, surrounded by your dead comrades, and you were having an epiphany about the futility of the life you had led. Think back, priest. Surely there is another explanation?
I need no other explanation. You may
It
be
was
wise in
me,
many things,
surprise.
but you cannot know what goes on in my own mind.
That would have been funny if you would have said that right there. That would have been funny.
I heard the voice of God and saw his face. Does the perception of events truly matter if the results are singular? I was born up
Yeah, anyways,
and
never mind.
sent into a deep slumber. And when I awoke, my wounds were healed. A piece of bone had been embedded in my skull, nearly a centimeter away from severing my spinal cord. When I rose, I searched for fellow survivors. I was alone. I decided to return to the land of my birth, but when I returned, I found my family home in ruins. The townsfolk told me Scandian raiders from the north had come to plunder my family's wealth. So they killed my brother and tortured my parents and sisters in an attempt to make my father give up the family treasures. My father had a weak heart and died before they could learn his secrets. I found my home in ruins and my family as bleached cadavers. There were no amends to be made at home. All I had to remember them by was their wealth, good wine, and this damned watch.
I am sorrowed by your loss, Uriah. If it is any consolation, the Scandians would not accept unity and were wiped out near 3 decades ago.
I know, but I do not revel in death anymore. The men who killed my family will have been judged by God, and that is justice enough for me.
Yeah, I guess
That
AKA
is
the
noble.
Emperor, if that's the
I took those
truth.
few keepsakes from the ruins
Yeah.
and made my way to the nearest settlement, thinking I'd get blind drunk and try to figure out what to do with my life. Halfway there, I met an old priest in need of help, in desperate search of the next caretaker of the Folga Labis. I knew I had found my purpose. I had spent my entire life until then living for myself, but when I saw the spire of that church, I knew that God had a purpose for me. I should have died at Gadwer, but I was saved for a reason.
And what was the reason?
To serve God, to bring his words to the people, to do good where others would not, to be a beacon in the coming dark.
And that's what you've been doing here?
That is what I've been trying to do, but the Emperor's promulgators traverse the globe with his message of denouncing the supernatural and criminalizing the devout. I assume that is why you are here, and why none of my congregation have come here tonight.
You would be correct. In a manner of speaking, I have come to try and convince you of the error of your ways, to learn of you and to show you that there is no need for any divine powers to guide humanity. This is the last church on Terra, and it falls to me to offer you this chance to embrace the new way willingly.
Or?
There is no or, my dear priest. Come. Let us go back
Say goodbye
out into
to the church.
as we talk. I want to teach you of all that belief
That-
in gods has done for you.
That reminds me of the guy with the little hand in Scary Movie. I think it's, what is it, Scary Movie 2? Sorry.
For humanity down the ages, the bloodshed, the horror, and the persecution. I will tell you of this, and you will see how damaging such belief is.
And then? You will go on your way, friend Apocalypsis?
No.
It is my sincerest hope that we will go together. You know of gene breeding?
Aye. Very little is not gene-bred these days.
And you have heard of the once great city of Zoser in the Nordafric conclaves?
Yes, I have been to Zoza. At least I saw what my guide told me were its ruins.
True. Not much is left. Anyway, the scientists of Zoser sought to end a great famine that was sweeping the Nordafric conclaves through gene-breeding animals that would grow more quickly and more easily in their harsh climate. When one of the local cults caught wind of the gene breeding, they saw it as an affront to their god. They were very much against the modification of genetics because they thought that their god had designed them as they were, and it was a sin to meddle in such things. This cult, the Zozerites, saw the lead scientist.
I would say, like, if you're getting prosthetic legs and stuff like that, that's fine, right? When you start tweaking with the DNA and let's say the mind per se, that's where it gets a little fishy, in my opinion, right?
And a Pashtar as the next embodiment of evil, seeking to defile all the people by feeding them the embodiment of sin. They went on a rampage, stabbing and clubbing any Pashtar they could find. Of course, the Pashtar retaliated, and rioting spread throughout the city and left close to 1,000 people dead. They did not again try to gene breed new farm stock, and untold thousands more died to the famine.
Is there a point to that story?
Absolutely. It typifies religion and tells a universal tale of religious behavior that has been reoccurring since the beginning of human history. Religion actively impedes forward progress by
Yeah, yes they do, because what they do is they gatekeep, right? Puts a man in between you and the text itself, right? And usually it'll be more towards the church, right? It'll be biased. And whatever else, you can't look this way, you can't look that way, you must look this way, right? Basically is what it is.
Producing stubborn people who fear advancement.
A far-fetched example, friend Apocalypsis. One freakish story cannot serve as proof of theory that all belief in the divine is a bad thing. Why don't you tell the story of the time a church
And then if you don't do it, right?
organized a program to help the poor and the sick and the dying? Why
That's wrong no matter where it is, right?
do you not tell a story of when faith and religion gave a community the strength to stick together and help each other through Old Night? Through faith comes character, and through our character there is moral strength. Without such guidance, the world would descend into anarchy.
A secular
True.
government with strict laws and programs could accomplish all that you have listed without creating stubbornness or creating a dependability on a church that would impose further taxes upon the poor and make waste of otherwise productive time. The idea that the church is a moral compass just
Well,
isn't
I guess they
true.
don't want to know about
Where
China.
the church is strong, it
China.
causes cruelty.
Sorry.
Intense belief produces intense hostility. Only when faith loses its force can a society hope to become humane and progress.
I don't believe that. My holy book gives instructions on how to live a good life. It has lessons humanity needs. I have benefited greatly, as have the people in the town below.
Are you sure?
Well, in the Bible, right, we have the Ten Commandments, which are basically the golden rules, what every society goes off of, right? Now, whether you say, well, of course it's in there because it's the golden rules of humanity and stuff like that, right? But a lot of these societies came from, you know, now, did they do it like they were supposed to? No. Right? But anyways, I better stop.
Sure. I have read your holy book, and much of it is bloody and
Before I
vengeful.
go into a rant
I
about the
suspect
church again.
an outside spectator would view the people on those pages not as exemplars of proper behavior, but terrifying examples
There's some of the worst examples of all this, right?
of corrupt morals.
You are missing the point, Apocalypsis. Much of the text is not meant to be taken literally. It is symbolic or allegorical.
That is exactly my point. You priests pick and choose which bits of your book to take literally.
See, this is where I have to differ from this guy, and a lot of the Christian church, right? Because they'll say a lot of that stuff is allegorical and it's all this, right? But when you actually take it literally, you actually start getting somewhere with it, right? But anyways.
And which to read as symbolic. And that is a personal matter, not a divine.
Until it actually says this is a symbol, right? Or this is this, and it explains what it was talking about.
One. You may be pure and noble, Uriah, but all too often a priest is a man who is cruel and purely seeking personal gain.
Usually when someone says that's an allegory or a symbol or whatever, it's usually a cop-out. So,
religion has no place in a fair and just society.
Just like that, he was using a cop-out, right?
In ages past, a frightening number of people took these holy books absolutely literally, sowing untold misery and death because they truly believed the words they read. The history of religion is a horror story.
Depends on what you base it off of, right? Is it thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not do whatever, right? And even then, right, it's in the Bible, it says, for the wages of sin is death. Yeah, right? And people have this idea that people were just out accusing people and stoning them and all that, right? There was a whole system behind that, right? You had to have 3 witnesses. And if those 3 witnesses were lying, they got the same, punishment as the other person did. And so there was a whole system to that, right? And where was I getting with that? But basically, it does depend on where, taking something literal, does it have good morals to it, I guess is the right way to say it, right? And just like thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not lie, steal, right? But there's also caveats to that, like lying to keep someone from dying, right? If someone's looking for somebody, like the soldiers are coming, right? Anyways, I'm going too far off. You guys get what I'm saying though, right? But it also can be bad, right? Taking it literally. Especially when one says destroy this or that person because they're that, right? Anyways.
Uriah, and if you doubt it, look to the past and see what humanity has done in the name of their God.
And I will say this too, Christianity, a lot of it hasn't really represented the Bible pretty much at all, right? And I'll keep my tongue on that, but yeah, it hasn't really represented it at all. And what happened is we have these certain set of ways that we had, right? But because this group, didn't like what was being done or whatever, and they were getting their butts kicked, this group over here was getting their butts kicked, so they were like, okay, well, we're going to do these because this group here, is kicking our butts without being too, I don't know. Some of you guys may know what I'm talking about there, because there was a split with Christianity, and I guess the Hebrew roots of it, right? I'll just say that.
Gods over the millennia. In ancient times, ritual sacrifices were commonplace. To appease their vile gods, priests drowned women and children in sacred wells.
Because they would be terrorized if they didn't. In the book of Enoch, it explains that, like, these giants, right, would terrorize them if they didn't, which they were eating humans, okay? That's what was going on. It says, in the book of Enoch, it says they couldn't sustain these guys, humans couldn't, so they turned on them. So.
Cut the heart out of their slaves and prisoners. They would drive a pile through a maiden's body.
So that's why humanity went nuts with this, right? Because they were scared of their gods.
Pacify a non-existent creature.
You cannot seriously compare my religion to such barbarism. You describe ignorant savagery, not religion as I would name it.
Can't I? It was never uncommon for religions founded in this region of the world to use their faith to justify conquest without mercy. The rich desired more power, but the peasantry would not fight for their kings and their lords just to further the interest of those who ruled them so cruelly. The lords knew this. They guised their political objectives with religious significance by the just and marvelous judgment of God. And the people fought fervently for a cause with no merit. Extremism bred
that is 100% correct, actually.
Extremism, and the retaliation was swift, now that war had been initiated on religious pretexts.
And it is 100% true, right? Religion is there to control you, right? It's there to control how you think, how you act, and all that, right? And it's supposed to be a relationship, right, between you and God. What religion does is it comes in right between you and God, right? That's religion. And you gotta conform to that instead of to the text that actually says thou shalt not kill, steal, destroy, and all that, right? And back then they banned the people from reading the Bible, right? So you had to go to them. Anyways.
The conflicts escalated and the battling continued until little was left but fields littered with
and this was in the Church of England, the Catholic Church, even Protestant churches were like this too, right?
The foolish and the deceived. But sorrow or remorse was never tolerated for such a thing, as the crusade was God's will, after all.
No, it was the will of it was the will of the Roman Empire.
Is ancient history. As you say, the nobles were bent on furthering their own interests. They used religion as an excuse, but in their greed, they would have committed these atrocities one way or another.
Yeah, that is true.
The truth of events so lost in the mists of time.
I would agree with you, had they not repeated the act nearly a century later. Warriors laid siege to the Sex stronghold in ancient France, and when the city fell, the generals asked their leader how they might tell the faithful from the traitors among the captives. The leader, who followed his God, ordered the warriors to kill them all. God will know his own. 20,000 men, women, and children were lost to faith that day. Of course, For fear that any may escape, an organization was given absolute power over the people, with its sole purpose.
And this is where you have to ask yourself, were they really Christian, or not saying. Anyways, I don't think they were or anything like that, or whoever those they were. But that's the question you have to ask yourself. When a pastor does something nefarious, right? You got to ask yourself, well, was he keeping the Ten Commandments? Did he lie, steal, cheat, on his wife, whatever? If he's doing all that stuff, you have to ask, okay, well, maybe he wasn't really a Christian. Maybe he was just using it, right?
To hunt down.
See that people, they like to blame. Yeah, I'll shut up. I'll just say people's actions. We need to focus on people's actions, right? It's not about what they say. It's about what their fruits are, right? Jesus even said, they will be known by their fruits, not by because they say they're a Christian, right? Or a Muslim, or a Buddhist.
Found those who ran. They brought about hysteria and tortured any they so pleased. They did not stop once all their enemies were hunted down and killed either. They too had convinced themselves of their holiness. They exterminated whole towns on the merest suspicion of witchcraft or treachery. When it was all said,
and what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of these witches and stuff, they were claiming to be witches, which a lot were, right? Which was wrong, right? No matter what. And but there were also Christians that didn't. They wanted to read the Bible and all this stuff. Keep the Ten Commandments, right? That was forbidden, right? So a lot of them too were claimed to be witches, which they weren't, right? They were just people wanting to follow what the Word of God says, right? Not Pastor such and such, or Pope such and such.
and done, near 100,000 were dead. Most of them were innocent.
If you'll allow me, I shall turn
Probably.
your logic back upon you, Apocalypsis. Had it been a secular government that decided they required more land and riches, do you truly believe they would have decided against it for no reason other than that there was no divine justification? Look back upon your great knowledge of history. Do you truly not recall any secular government that drove itself mad with suspicion of treachery and created a state ruled by surveillance and torture? You chop apart history, take what you so desire, and insist I behold the bloody remains. Humans are flawed, and religion is more often a convenient scapegoat than a corrupting force.
If you believe that, then you have been shut away in this church for far too long, priest. All the dictators deposed through unification were...
What do people say? Oh, that's against my religion, right? Even though, I better shut up. Better shut up.
Who killed millions in their constant warring, burning away all hope of
They just
progress.
use it as a get-out-of-jail-free card when it's convenient.
Death camps saw millions dead in the Indonesia bloc. He died but 30 years ago and claimed his entire life had been served in the name of a great...
They got down there quick. The heck?
You fixate on the blood and death and forget all the good that can be achieved through faith.
Uriah,
That
I
depends.
only see religion for what it can be. I am seeing it for what it most
Are you doing
always
it to help
is.
people?
Savagery pervades our world, and it is sustained by ignorance and crude belief. It is true
Yeah.
that before the descent of Old Night, religion had lost its power over the people. But like the worst kind of poison, it lingered and fostered division amongst those who endured. Without belief, divisions blur over generations. New generations mingle, intermarry, and forget ancient wounds. It is only belief in gods and divine entities that keep them alien to one another. And anything that divides people breeds inhumanity and cruelty. Religion is the canker in mankind's heart that,
again, right? A house divided against itself will not stand, right?
serves such an ugly purpose.
I have heard all that you have had to say, friend Apocalypsis, and I have finally heard enough. Yes, people have done terrible things to one another in the name of their
Dude looks
gods.
goofy.
They have done terrible things regardless of the course of their beliefs.
I'm kidding. I don't mean
An
that.
acceptance of gods and an
This is
afterlife
good
a
animation,
vital
so-
part of what makes us who we are. If
Well,
you
not,
take that away from
you know.
humanity, what do you suggest takes its place?
Book-like
In my
animation.
many years as a priest, I have ministered to many dying people, and the emotional benefit of religion's power to console the wounded and the dying, as well as those left behind, cannot be underestimated.
There is a flaw in your logic, priest. Religion's power to console gives it no credence or validity. It might be a comfort to a dying man to believe that he will go to some bountiful paradise of endless joy. But even if he dies with a wonderful smile on his face, it means nothing in the grand scheme of things. Better that less would die due to the removal of religion than each zealot die with a smile on their face.
Maybe, but when my time comes, I will die with God's name on my lips.
Are you afraid to die, Uriah?
No,
Truly?
truly. I have my share of sins, but I have spent the greater part of my
He
life
about to
in the
die.
service of my
I
God,
have a feeling.
and I believe I have served him
I
faithfully.
didn't get to I
So
didn't
what
finish
is
the
it
book
that
fully
when you
just
go to
yet
these people who are
before
dying
this.
and clinging to their beliefs that they don't welcome the end of their life? Surely, the gathered family and friends should be of good cheer and celebrate their relatives' passing. After all, if eternal
I
paradise
figured I would
awaits
get
us,
it in this.
why
Get
are
the
they
end
not
of it here.
filled with gleeful
I haven't heard
anticipation?
this last part, so
Could it be that in their heart of hearts, they don't really believe it?
Are you ever excited to have a loved one move on or leave in search of something greater? Are you ever excited to leave your family and friends in search of a better life? Even if it is for the best, are you delighted to leave all that you know to be thrust into the unknown? No one is. Life is a gift, and our chance to make ourselves into someone before our time in the afterlife. Who would give that up willingly? If you cannot see that plainly, then you are a fool.
sorry. Sometimes I find this animation, where like no feet moving funny. I don't know why.
For the benefit of mankind, which is his people, so it is taught in the holy words of our order, and above all
There
things
is
that God
no
will
one to
protect.
hear you.
I don't care what you say anymore. You have come here to do what you feel you need to do, and I'll not buttress your ego and self-righteousness by playing along any longer. You listen to my words, but hear nothing. End the charade.
As you wish. No more
Chink.
games.
Yep. Gotta love it. Big Daddy Emperor. It was him all along.
Now do you understand the futility of what you do here?
You are the Emperor.
I am. It is time to go, Uriah.
Go? Go where? There is nowhere else for me in this godless world of yours.
Of course there is. Embrace the new
It
way.
was me,
Be part of something incredible.
Uriah.
The world
I
is
am
trying
your
to stand
father.
on the brink of achieving everything you
Father,
ever dreamed.
son, sisters, brothers, former roommate. You guys may appreciate that if you guys know what I'm
Rome's
talking
work
about.
was never meant for darkness. Only in the light can it achieve its full potential.
Oh, that's what you guys were saying. So he was the one who slayed the dragon. Okay,
And only when
okay.
the suffocating shadows of a religion that teaches us not to question is gone from this world, will we see its true radiant.
That's creepy.
Miss
If I heard that, man, I don't
In
know.
time, I will build an imperium of such grandeur and magnificence that this will seem like a puzzle problem. Now, let us be on our way.
Oh boy, that did not happen. Or at least as of yet. Oh, he knows he about to die.
How can you do this? You say you stand for reason and the advancement of understanding.
To me, it's just a
But here
building.
you are destroying a repository of knowledge.
Some things are best forgotten.
I hope you have foreseen the consequences of a world bereft of religion.
I have. It is my dream. An imperium of man that exists without recourse to gods and the supernatural. A united galaxy with terror at its heart.
A united galaxy.
Well, that didn't happen.
Indeed. Soon enough, unity will be achieved on Terra. It is time to reclaim humanity's lost empire.
Up until the
stars.
Horus Heresy.
With you at its head, I presume.
Of course. Nothing of such grand scale can be achieved without a singular vision at its heart. Least of all, the reconquest of the galaxy. There is a place for you at my side, Uriah. You are noble and your heart is true. We have need of iterators who would spread my imperial truth across the stars to all those planets without guidance.
I can submit to no imperial truth. My entire life has been altered by, at best, a misunderstanding. At worst, my life has been spent following a lie. But you know what? It doesn't matter that my life has been one massive falsehood. I came here with my heart open and emptied by grief. The spirit of my God had entered my soul and filled me with love. My devotion was my salvation, and I have spread a doctrine of love and forgiveness. No amount of words and tricks may change that. Even now, despite
I will say he is a
my
lot
heart is filled with love.
more devout than a lot of Christians.
What makes
I'll
faith
say
so
that.
powerful, Emperor, is that it requires no proof. Belief is enough.
I feared such a thing. I wish you would join my great crusade, Uriah. Soon I shall expand my imperium to the furthest
You can join our
corners of the
crusade
galaxy.
to become
All my sons beside me. I know
a
that
non-religious, but
you make a virtue
in the future be religious.
Did you not just speak to me of the horror of the Crusades? And what evil men do in the name of purity? You are no better than the holy men you were telling me about.
The difference is that I know I am right, Uriah.
Spoken like a true autocrat.
You misunderstand, Uriah. I have seen the narrow path that humanity must walk to survive. This is how we must begin.
It is a dangerous road you travel. To deny humanity a thing will only make them crave it more. I see no reality in which your goals will not bring them
He
disaster.
called it, didn't he?
Where
Dang.
your subjects do not begin to see you as a god. I truly hope, in the name of all that is divine, you are right. But I dread the future you forge.
I wish only the best for my people.
I believe you, Apocalypsis. But I cannot be a part of it.
Can I have that watch? I'm sorry, that's messed up. I'm sorry. Well, I guess he went down with the ship, huh? Alrighty. I believe that is the end. Or not. It is not the end. There's still a lot more to go. Or not a lot more, but 4 more minutes. I lied. Sorry about that.
Come, we have a galaxy to conquer.
I hope there is no echo, but I'm sure there is, man. Darn. That's gonna bother me. The Last Church. Alright, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that. You guys got to, I guess, see a little bit in my mind, I guess, per se. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and you guys have a wonderful day.